All right, welcome to the 30-day redemption reboot. This is day 2 of the mind segment. I'm your host, Kashab, and today's topic is something that I believe is extremely important in light of all that's happening in the world. 30-day redemption, our purpose is to make sure that we help others during this time of uncertainty to have a solid and consistent resource for mind, body, and spirit. And so in this mind segment, we have a special guest, Jabrita Shelton, and she's going to take us through the topic of manipulation using trauma. And she's going to go into details. So just make sure that you have any kind of pen and pad that you need, because she's going to go through some good information that you need to know about, either for the past, for the present, and maybe you can use it in the future. Jabrita has a company, Jabrita Shelton and Co. And she will also be hosting a few workshops through 30-day redemption, and we'll give you some information on that later on. Our disclaimer is that the opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the presenter. They do not purport to reflect the opinions or views of the 30-day redemption or its members, officers, staff, partners, or advertisers. So, Jabrita, let's get you on. And we will go ahead and probably leave 10 minutes or so towards the end of the presentation for Q&A. So if anyone has questions, you can ask it then. Jabrita, please come on live and give us what you got.
Hello. And thank you for joining us today. I just want to give it up to Shab and to Rafaela for all of the tremendous work that you all are doing in this community. So thank you for having me today. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our presentation of manipulation of trauma. The manipulation of trauma. Okay. All right, so in today's presentation, we're going to be talking about the psychological and emotional manipulation of trauma. We're also going to delve into the ethics behind manipulation. How to protect yourself and your loved ones, and altering thought above emotion. So let's just jump right into it. So manipulation at its best is simply the action of manipulating something or someone in a skillful manner. Let's get into the various forms of manipulation and how they impact us, and the ways we can alter thought above those emotions. Here you see a picture, and they say pictures are worth 1,000 words. So I want you to keep this image in your head as we go through this presentation today. And I want you to ask yourself, what do you see? And why was that the first thought that you had when you saw this picture? So what is psychological and emotional manipulation? Psychological manipulation is a type of social influence that aims to change the behavior or the perception of others through indirect, deceptive, or underhanded tactics. By advancing the interests of the manipulator, often another's expense, at another person's expense, these such methods could also be considered exploitive and devious. So let's be very, very clear. Psychological manipulation is a type of social influence, okay? The psychological vulnerabilities of the opponent is usually adopted to know what tactics are likely to be most effective and what those weapons of most effective are against them, are used against them. So we have a lot of controlled bias in these practices of psychological and emotional manipulation. So psychological manipulation changes the perception or behavior of others through being underhanded, being deceptive, or even abusive. They even use forceful and abusive tactics. Such methods are often considered as exploitive, abusive, devious, deceptive, and is often used in an attempt to control the behavior of others. As you see today through media, and we'll get a little bit more into that as we go into our PowerPoint presentation, but if you see not only before the riots and the looting, but COVID and previous incidences that has been perpetuated, and all you see is the live action of terror and fear that's impeded upon the psychological and the emotional data of us as human beings. So let me go a little bit further. Psychological and emotional manipulation uses various forms of psychological abuse, such as brainwashing, bullying, emotional blackmail, or even to coerce others into doing something that they would not naturally or normally do. It's also known as emotional manipulation. So again, keep that image in your mind as we're going through our slides, because there's going to be a Q&A at the end, and I really want you to understand what is happening in our world today. So let's talk about how does psychological and emotional manipulation apply to trauma, okay? Trauma, as stated in previous teachings, is the scarring of one's mind in and around a particular area, a particular incident, or occurrence in a singular or multiple points of life. When a person has endured traumatic experiences, regardless of the age or stage it has been discovered in life, it has the propensity to leave very distorted impressions on the brain's will, the intellect, and the images stored in its imagination. So how does psychological, emotional, and emotional manipulation impact daily living? As you can see, we have a list of things, and we're going to go through each one of them. But I want to give you a list, and then we'll go in deeper detail or deeper explanation of what those include. So social influence. Social influence, we're specifically talking about all of the channels in which platforms of social networking, social influence, your Facebook, your Instagram, your TikTok, your Twitter, your Snapchat, all of those of various sorts play a huge part in our psychological and emotional channels of manipulation in daily living. The next one we see is the news feeds, CNN, Fox News, for instance. We have, TSR, all of these channels that, impede news of some sort, be it fake news, be it real news, be it truth news, be it lie news, however you want to place it. This is also a form of psychological and emotional manipulation used in daily living. Interaction with others, we're going to go deeper into that. Employment, community, religious institutions, government, history, and the socialite exchange, such as our beliefs, our values, and our morals. Let's go a little deeper. So social influence. In today's society, we have been conditioned to turn to our phones before we turn to the Creator. We have been conditioned to turn to our phones before we turn to greet our loved ones, even before we do the necessary things to prepare ourselves for our day. I want you to ask yourself a question. What do you think is wrong with that? If the very first thing you do before you say thank you for today, the very first thing you do before you greet those to whom you say you love, the very first thing you do is to open and avail yourself to outside sources of information that plays into the psyche and the emotional wiring that either puts us closer to the goal for the day or takes us psychologically and emotionally further away. What's wrong with that? Then we're going to talk about the news feeds. Now these platforms feed more fear than faith. Most of you would agree that they feed more lies than they do the truth and expose more bad than they do good. So as we avail ourselves to the feeding into and relying on these sources for information, we inherently and subconsciously begin to act in fear and exemplify the same behaviors we have witnessed as lies. So again, we're talking about the psychological and emotional manipulation of daily living. Interacting with others. These interactions comes by the way of relationships, the relationship we have been given with ourselves, how we view relationships based on the examples we witnessed, and how we interact with those in close proximity, and surrounding as results of our own traumas and the ability to heal, evolve, or stay stuck within that trauma. So we're gonna dig a little bit deeper into that interacting with others, because social networking has made it so easy to say that we're actually interacting, but we're not really interacting if the personable contact, actual dialogue, talking, conversating one to another is absent from that process. So we have adapted these psychological and emotional behaviors, or witnessed these behaviors as normal, when the reality is they are abnormal, very abnormal to our well-being as human beings. Let's talk about the employment. So as employers, we are subject and bond to policies, procedures, and cultures that of adapting mindsets we don't necessarily agree with 100% for the sake of providing income to sustain your basic needs. I'm gonna say that again. As employees, and many of us are employees, as employees, we are subjected to and bound to policies and procedures of and cultures of adapting mindsets we don't necessarily agree with 100% for the sake of providing income to sustain our basic needs. Because of this, we have people who give themselves thinking, power, and submit to a total control in thought and deed, not for your life or your well-being, but leaving little to nothing left for yourself. Many of us work jobs that we have been in, titles and positions that we have held over, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And in doing so, what I realized and what we begin to realize is shared association. We begin to pick up mindsets of those to whom we are around. They usually say that you can always tell who you are by the 5 people that you have around you. That being said, if the majority of your time is spent being an employee, adapting other policies, adapting procedures, adapting ethics and codes of conduct from an outside biased view, how much do you have left of yourself? Or how much do you give yourself outside of that psychological or emotional environment of manipulation? Let's talk about community. Our community plays into the manipulation because depending on where you live, the aesthetics in which you are around, its sustainability, the opportunities that you have been afforded through the community, it either elevates your thought or it pushes you deeper into low level energy and emotions. This also leads to actions and feelings of either hope or hopelessness. I'll say this, I'm originally from Gary, Indiana, Chicago, Illinois, however you want to place it or put it on the scope of home for me. And I lived in a very underprivileged or underserved community where the opportunities were not limitless. In fact, every other corner was either a church, a liquor store, a chicken shack, or a gas station. And those were the things in which I was conditioned to believe because of the aesthetics, which play a huge part. Most people don't realize how aesthetics plays into the psyche or to the psychological or the emotional uprising or downrising of how you set the tone in your day-to-day living. Color is another thing that plays into the psychological and the emotional aesthetics of your daily living. So when I lived in that neighborhood or lived in that community, even just in January, I just went back home. And I hadn't been home in maybe about 7-8 years. But I remember when I left in 2011 and the buildings that were standing there then, which is now the house that I used to live in is the only house that is still standing on the block in which I lived prior to moving away. I remember waking up one day when my children were very young, and I looked around and I said, I don't want to be here anymore. I want something better. What I didn't realize then is that my environment had played, or my community had played such a significant weight and role in my psychological and my emotional well-being. So I'm gonna go a little bit further into religious institutions. While this is a tough restraint to break, it is necessary. I'm gonna say that again. While this is a tough restraint to break, it is certainly necessary. Religious is not only religion, but it is the ability to do something over and over, even if that something does not serve the greater part of yourself or those you love. Within religious institutions, you give up your free thought for the exchange of a philosophy that either enhances your life or restricts you through bondage, such as bondage of spirituality, emotionally, and in many cases, financially. Let's talk about government. And I'm probably going to spend a little bit more time on this one specifically because of what we're dealing with today. So let's talk about it. Government. We're currently facing one of the greatest examples of government manipulation in history. I'm going to say that again. We are currently facing one of the greatest examples of government manipulation in history. Well, at least in the history of my 40 years of life. The government being the largest sector of natural power and influence. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it again. The government being the largest sector of natural power and influence has and continues to use psychological manipulation by the emotional exploitation of this country and the pain Black people for far too long has had to deal with. It is systemic design, and in many cases, we have failed to maintain power as a collective people, therefore ending in surrender to the oppressor. When I was preparing for this presentation, I took into account, into effect, all of the many things that we have been encountering from one situation to another. Here we are, country, the world has been shut down due to COVID-19. We were restricted from going out of our homes without being masked, without being gloved, restricted from having social interaction with our peers, our friends, our families, our loved ones, forced to look at life from a more secluded perspective. How is it that not even 30 days of the states being reopened, now we are in an uproar for the totality of injustices that has been done repeatedly over and over and over again? As I thought about the government and its role in manipulating trauma that has been borne on the backs of our forefathers and those who have gone before us and those who still today stand with us. When I thought about the anger, the energy that is infused in the earth at this time, particularly, I had to make one of two choices because I was angry, not because I don't believe in what they are fighting for, what our people are fighting for, but because I believe that there is a systemic design attached to what is happening right now. And while many of us stood by and tried to comply with the things that we were being told, the government had a different and an alternative motive in why they were doing what it is that they were doing behind COVID-19. So please understand that psychological and emotional manipulation comes from those who are in power, understanding because they have spent a surmountable amount of time studying the opponent, studying their prey, studying those people to whom they are planning to go in with a strategy in place, a strategy in mind to impede their own thoughts above what seems to be your free will. We'll go a little bit deeper into history, the history. As it has been said, history repeats itself. I would like to challenge that saying today by challenging you to think about it in this way particularly. History repeats itself until we find solutions, new solutions that has real impacting change, that can be both duplicated effectively and communicated in various ways so that those being affected can have a more meaningful understanding and be careful to protect it at all costs. Please understand that what is happening today is by design. And many of us in our anger are falling into the belly of the design. Why are we doing that? We're doing it because, first of all, the emotion of anger, we know it all far too well. But it's just not about anger. It's about the design of injustice and us having to lay on our backs and take it over and over and over again. Today, I want to give you some solutions on how we're going to be able to make some shifts so that we can be more organized and strategize new ways to, one, get above, alter our thoughts above the emotion of the psychological and emotional manipulation. So let's talk about the socialite, the societal exchange. Okay, this is the societal exchange. These are your core beliefs. Okay, these are your core beliefs, your values, your roundtable discussions with your children. These are discussions at your tables, discussions in your homes, in the privacy of your own homes. This is this being a way of life, so much so that when other beliefs try and impede your belief system, it plays its own defense in expelling the lies, the myths, and maintains its own moral control. It does not matter what is evoked externally. You have to make a choice of what happens internally and how you choose to deal with it in the corridors of your own home, within your own family, amongst your children and those to whom you are responsible for. So let's look at the ethics behind manipulation. I want to talk about that for a little bit. The ethics of manipulation. Ethics, the moral principle that governs a person's behavior or conducting of an activity. Think about that for a moment. The ethics of manipulation. So this also lets us know that manipulation has its own design. It has its own design. It comes with its own set of rules. Understand this. Ethics of manipulation asks two questions. The two questions it asks is the identification question and the question of evaluation. Let's go into it. So the identification question is based on definition and identification. The question asks, how can we? Okay? Very specific. How can we? So the design is, while you are going day to day to do the things that you normally would do, the question is, how can we break their silence? How can we impede control? How can we get them to do the things that we want them to do? How can we? So forth and so on. So how can we identify which forms of influence are manipulative and which ones are not? Manipulation is often said to bypass, to undermine, or to subvert the target's rational deliberation. It is not always clear right? We don't always get it right away. We don't always understand that this is happening right away. There's something that happens that takes place that awakens this reaction or this thought as to say, you know, are we being manipulated? Or is this some form of conspiracy? So it is not always clear, however, whether this claim is meant as a definition of manipulation or merely as a statement about manipulation. However, let us consider whether the idea that manipulation bypasses reason serve in the identification process of manipulation. Now, what I just said is this. Manipulation, of course, is often said by bypass. So that means that when you're not paying attention, undermine. It means to do it in secret or in private. It means to make decisions that you didn't know were being made. This is the reason why it's important to not only have a seat at the table, but to have counterparts that also have seats at the table so that you can understand and know what those conversations are, being said. And also you can also know when you need to inject your thought or your perspective so that decisions are not made on your behalf. And then you're caught in the end to deal with the decision that you never made. Or subvert, targets rational deliberation. So think about it this way. The target, if we look at the world and we look at the history of the world and the demographics of, you know, all the things that we're dealing with now, who is the target? Who is being affected? Who has been the most affected by the deliberate injustices, the deliberate laws impeding on the constitutional rights of its people, of its kind? Let's go a little bit further. The evaluation question. Now, the evaluation question is a little bit different because it is based on morality, the morality of its people or its kind. The evaluation question asks, how should we? So you have identification that asks, how can we? And then you have the evaluation question that asks, how should we? So how should we deal with the situation? How should we be thinking about or strategizing or organizing moving forward? How should we be looking into the undermining bias of its government and how it is affecting its people? So it is a question of morality. How should we evaluate the moral status of manipulation? Ask yourself the question. From the information that you've received so far, what are some things that you can look at personally that will help you evolve your thinking moving forward as you transition out of the manipulation of psychological and emotional trauma? So subliminal advertising tactics, along with hypnosis and behavioral conditioning, are also commonly portrayed as effective methods to influence others without their knowledge. I'm going to say that again. But before I say that, I remember seeing a post. It was actually a video clip that someone designed and put together. And on this clip, there were sick people walking around, and the majority of them had question marks above their head. But while those question marks were above their head, their posture was bent over, their cell phones were in their phone, and their thumbs were scrolling. So subliminal advertising tactics, along with hypnosis and behavioral conditioning, are commonly portrayed as effective methods to influence others without their knowledge, and thus without engaging their capacities for rational deliberation. What that says to me is that with all of these different channels that we are entertaining on a regular and a very consistent basis, day in and day out, the imprinting of the psychological and emotional subliminal advertising that we are consuming, taking in, not necessarily digesting, but we're consuming and we're consuming and we're consuming, and we're becoming so full and so fat with everybody else's subliminal advertising that we have not even begun to have a rational thought of mind in our daily deliberation when it comes to how can we and how should we. The effectiveness of such tactics is almost certainly exaggerated in the popular imagination. So where does these thoughts live? We see them, we witness them, we consume them, yet they are stuck in our imaginations, in our psychological and our emotional banks. And so the trauma that we have is now breeding on the subliminal advertising of the behavioral conditioning that's been portrayed as effective methods of influence, right? We have given permission by participating. So have you ever heard of not making a decision is making a decision? I'm going to apply that here and say that we are participating in furthering the destruction of ourselves through psychological and emotional manipulation of our trauma based on the sources in which we consume. Now, if we imagine the tactics working as well as they are sometimes portrayed, then they will constitute clear examples of what it might mean to say that the manipulation has definitely bypassed reason. Now, I want to talk a little bit about gaslighting. And though I didn't put it in the front of our PowerPoint, I thought it was very efficient and it would be very effective for you to understand what gaslighting is, in addition to understanding manipulation of trauma. So let's get into it. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is manipulating someone by psychological means into questioning their own sanity. What do you have today? What have we been told time and time again? I'll take, for an example, the angry Black woman, right? I have heard that so many times, and the more and more I've heard it, it has made me, I would say it has made me have a different thought of perspective, but it also really made me upset to think that that was the narrative of a woman who understands her power and a woman who understands her place in the earth, and who understands her position in protecting that which she loves. So because she gives emotion, because she shares how she feels, because she has an opinion, now she is being made to be believed as the angry Black woman. So in that, you know, for a long time, we have questioned our own sanity. We've questioned, am I really the angry Black woman? You know, is it impossible for me to submit, and so forth and so on? That's another subject for another day. However, it plays into the psychological and the emotional manipulation of trauma. Okay. So gaslighting, manipulating someone by the psychological means into questioning their own sanity. When we look at what's happening today in the world, you have, you know, media, again, have silenced, you know, the injustices of Black people. And now what they're doing is they're smothering it by saying, you know, let's look at the looting, let's look at the rioting. Oh, they're burning down buildings, they're doing this, they're doing that. And or to go a bit further, you know, the decisions that were being made, the strategies that were being made at tables and rooms that we didn't have a seat at during COVID-19, that now opens up a whole nother agenda of injustices. And so that being said, you know, we're questioning ourselves. We're judging our counterparts. We're judging our sisters and our brothers based on their ability to express themselves in ways that many of us want to act and respond. But because of our own responsibilities and our own level of maturity and understanding, we choose not to. So let's go a little bit further. Gaslighting. Gaslighting, here's a few examples or a few samples of what gaslighting looks like, right? So these are questions that impede in the sanity of manipulation. Just take a look real quick. And if you can see them, they are, give me 1 second. Gaslighting is a form of manipulation and abuse concentrated on making someone doubt reality. How many people have seen what they believed to be true and get a difference of opinion, and now their thought has been altered and they're no longer seeing what they first understood as truth. They're no longer holding to that truth because it's now been distorted with another's opinion. To be believed, insanity. It is blatant lying or constant cover-ups. So it is, you know, saying one thing, as we have seen exemplified in our government, saying one thing, but actually meaning another. The actions contradicts the words and the broken promises. Oh, we're going to do this, or this is going to happen, and that never happens. So as a result of that, we're constantly making promises that we're not keeping. No accountability. Feeling like you have to defend reality. That is one of the most prominent things that we're dealing with right now. Feeling like we have to defend the reality of injustices while we are still being promised lies and the actions are not congruent to the promises delivered. Your self-esteem slowly erodes away, and you begin to question what is real. You start to think you are bad or crazy, or do I really fit those stereotypes? You begin to denying conversations or events that they ever happened. oh, have you ever heard the term, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing? So, no, I didn't do that. Oh, no, that didn't happen. Oh, no, I never said that. Those types of behaviors are what I'm referring to when we talk about gaslighting. And then last, but certainly not least, manipulating others to see you differently. So you want to paint this picture that, oh, I'm this good person. I am, I have it all together. There is, you should listen to me. And what I'm saying is right. And what I'm saying is true. And it's my way, or you're wrong about anything that you think outside of what I am perpetuating. So here's another form of gaslighting. These are things that actually are said out of people's mouth, out of the manipulator's mouth. You're crazy. That didn't happen. Why are you so sensitive? Oh, I'm just joking. That was just a joke. I really didn't mean anything by it. But in all honesty, it was their truth. You're overreacting. You must be confused again. That's not right. You're remembering things all wrong. And what are you talking about? Just calm down. So we have seen this behavior from our own government. We have seen these come through from the head of state in such a way that, no, we are not the ones who are crazy. It's the one who seems to believe his own lie that is confused, because we are not the ones confused. So psychological and emotional manipulation comes in various forms. It plays on our trauma. It plays on the historical, and all of those many sources that I had given you a few slides up. It plays on the will and the intellect of those to whom they deem inferior to their power and to their significance. With these statements being said, at the time you become aware or woke to the manipulation, you would have been so deep into it that you almost feel guilty for thinking anything other than your initial thought. That's so deep to me, so deep. Gaslighting imposes emotions of superiority, supremacy, guilt. It creates illusions. It demolishes confidence. It brings confusion and uncertainty. It empowers fear and frowns upon freedom of speech, thought, or exercise right. Its dominance is control and power. And the power it has, the more power it has, the more it takes. So I want to talk about protecting yourself and your loved ones from the psychological manipulation. And here's what that looks like. So in order for us to protect ourselves and our loved ones from the psychological and the emotional manipulation of trauma, we have to be willing to uncover our trauma. Lies hide in the dark. Then they're smothered by secrets, and secrets destroy lives. I'm going to say that again. Lies hide in the dark. Then they're smothered by secrets, and secrets destroy lives. So we have to uncover our trauma. We have to be transparent in the conversations we have with each other, in the conversations we have with our children, with our spouses, with our partners, with our community, with our village. We have to stop hiding and acting as if it doesn't exist, because it's very real, very relevant, and we're constantly being triggered by those traumas that we have lied to ourselves about, lied to our children about, to our spouses about, and that we have not healed through because we continue to bury them in secret. The next thing is that we have to develop a system of truth and liberty without judgment. What do you mean by that, Jabrita? Develop a system of truth and liberty without judgment. This means to release yourself from guilt, from shame and judgment first. Then, after you have done that, go back and save and set free your village. Go back and tell your story, not from a victim standpoint, but from a victor standpoint, to infuse and empower those within the parameter of those you love. The next thing you need to do is don't be afraid to seek help. Help is available to you. Help is available for you. But you have to use wisdom in the help that you're seeking to help you through this process. So once you have been enlightened, it is your duty to teach what you have learned so that generations preceding you don't have to experience the same pitfalls in life. This not being afraid, taking courage, having courage, and being unapologetic in your courage to take this pursuit, to alter your thought above your emotions when it comes to the psychological and emotional manipulation of trauma. The next one is to have honest conversation. Have honest conversation. I'm almost done wrapping it up. I know my time is coming to a close. So you have to control the narrative by sorting your truth from the many lies you are fed daily. When you can be honest with yourself, it makes it easier to share an honest space with others, okay? It also fosters self-forgiveness and grace and love. And then you have to establish new norms. Tashab spoke about this on yesterday. I won't go into it. You can get the replay, but I did want to kind of just touch on that just a little bit and reiterate a little bit of establishing new norms. So define what your values, what your beliefs and your morals are apart from those fatal family traditions, the things that we've done without question, the things that we've done because they were done before us. Do things in a manner of understanding, okay? Seek understanding and give understanding to that which you have began to understand. Affirm what needs to be affirmed, comfort what you uncover, and find new ways to create new experiences that fosters acceptance, healing, and truth. And in our closing, we're going to talk about altering thought above emotion. So we alter thought by reconditioning our minds and adapting new normals, being accountable, and practicing accountability with those to whom we have the greatest influence over, and have fostered the greatest impact. We alter thought above emotion anytime we have an opportunity to behave in a predictable manner, yet choose to counter those sabotaging impulses with controlled and organized responses. When we expose the lies, we choose to forgive the person who injected the lie. Altering thought above emotion, when we recognize how manipulation has played into our traumas and into our fears and our anxieties, and we put a stop to it by educating ourselves and teaching others what has been learned through that experience. We alter thought above emotion. When that happens, you are in the face of your offender and choose to expose their pretense of power and control through systems and systemic design. Altering thought above emotions is it's not suppressing how you feel, nor is it passing judgment because someone else chose to act or respond differently than you would. However, it is making a decision to take personal responsibility in protecting and preserving your life. Altering thought above emotion is inevitably a personal choice. It's personal. It's a personal choice that when implemented speaks volumes of the person you are and the lives you are responsible for protecting. I hope that something was said in today's presentation that causes you to think, to have a shift in perspective as you move forward in dealing with and understanding the psychological and the emotional manipulation of trauma. With that being said, I am now open for questions and answers. Thank you so much for your time, for your attention. And again, to Shab and Rafaela, thank you for allowing me to be a part of 30-Day Redemption. Thank you.
Presentation, we always want more because each one of these modules, they need additional information. So if anyone has any questions, you can unmute your mic or you can type your question in the chat so we can have Jabrita answer the questions. If no one goes first, then I'll go first. Is it possible, or have you seen in your experience the victim of manipulation turning around and becoming the perpetrator of manipulation? So someone enjoying victimhood to the point where they begin to manipulate those who empathize with them. And what is that called?
Absolutely. It is actually called Stockholm Syndrome. Usually when the oppressed take on the identity of its oppressor and begin to act and or deliberately respond in correlation with the witnessing of exchange. So to say that it is definitely possible for the victim to take on the perspective of its oppressor and in turn say, let me say it like this. You begin to get things like, oh, we're not angry. We just want you to forgive. We want to forgive the offense of what has been done. But behind that, there is a completely opposing agenda. And so the manipulation, so I was standing on the left. Now my oppressor is on the right. And so I'm shifting so that I can align myself with what I've witnessed. And in turn, I begin to manipulate those who are standing on the opposite side of me. So it's also a way of continuing the control, the power, the influence, and perpetuating the lie. But it also identifies with, again, the how can we versus, how can we versus, I believe it was how should we.
Now, when a victim turns perpetrator in that scenario, is that more a survival mechanism, a defense mechanism, or is it an actual choice that they're making? Is it something where it's just they get so caught up with the personality of the offender that they begin to mirror them, or is it more so a deliberate choice to become like the offender?
It is, in my opinion, okay, I'm going to say that, in my opinion, it is always a choice. However, understanding that the options of choices may be limited, meaning I may be in fear of my life. Therefore, I go along with the oppressor so that my life can be spared in its process. And or I am deliberately making this choice in correlation with the witness because psychologically something happened that caused me to believe their truth as my own.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Dana has a question. She says, great presentation. What distinguishes manipulation from other forms of influence that are neither coercion nor persuasion? I'll read it again. What distinguishes manipulation from other forms of influence that are neither coercion nor persuasion?
What influences?
What distinguishes manipulation
Mm-hmm.
from other forms of influence that are neither coercion nor persuasion?
Again, in my opinion, it is distinguished through inherently how you feel about yourself. So, self-esteem, the confidence or the ability to make an altering choice and be able to deal with the consequences of that choice. And also being in a position where you're not certain about the choice that needs to be made. So as it relates to something that we see right now, we're dealing with, people being torn or people saying, and I'll just go this by an example. Some people say, oh, well, you have this platform. You should be speaking. Nobody should be silent. Nobody should not be saying anything, dealing with what we're dealing with now. Yet you have people who have chosen to not play into, what's happening, but use it in a different way. So I think it goes along with, your self-esteem, your ability to make, those decisions, and also your ability to know which decision is the best one for you to make. I hope that answers your question.
Dana, can you just send us an indication if that was the answer, or if you want to structure the question again, we could come back to it. We're going to go over a little bit because I think the Q&A is going to be very important for any clarity that anyone needs. So we're going to go over a little bit.
I can't hear you very well,
We're
Tashad.
just going to go over a little bit so that we could get all the questions answered in case anyone had a question that they want to ask.
Okay.
But I was saying, Dana, if that answers your question, oh, she said yes, thank you. Okay, perfect. All right. Did anyone else have any questions for Jabrita in regards to this subject, or does anyone have any comment? You can type it, or you can unmute your mic and you can ask the question. They're going easy on you like they went easy on me, Jabrita.
I see.
Let's see. See if anyone types anything. Okay. Gaslighting. Someone says gaslighting. What is your question about gaslighting? How do we put that gas out? How do we put the gas out for the gaslighting?
The best way that I can explain that is in gaslighting. You, again, what I stated was that you have to first identify. Once you identify what your traumas are, and you identify, those triggers in terms of, it could be, relational, it could be environmental, it could be, you know, within the context of something past or something present. Once you identify what those are, you have to begin to educate yourself around those triggers, right? And those traumas. Those triggers are there as an indication that something is wrong. You're upset, your deep breaths, your getting upset, all of the different things that happens when we're triggered emotionally. Those things are there as an indicator to let us know that something is wrong. And so, or it's something that I don't agree with. And so, in gaslighting, when you have, people who puppeteer, remember, go back to that image that I showed in the beginning. It's almost like the person that you deem superior or practices supremacy, or holds that weight in your life. And they know that they are pretty much puppeteering by, oh, that didn't happen. Or no, I never said that, those types of things. When that happens, you need to be able to stand true in what you have been able to identify as real for you. Don't allow yourself to back down from something that you have had a response to, whether it's a negative response or a positive response. You have to educate yourself around, why do I feel that way? What happened when, this is what happened when you said this to me. This is how I felt, your body posture, your thought as it relates to, yourself, and your thinking as it relates to, the environment or the relationship or the conversation you may be engaging in, or whatever that may be. So in order for you to be able to really navigate through those gaslighting experiences, is for you to educate yourself about where you are in your process, educate yourself and get honest with what your triggers are, what your traumas are, and then stand in your truth when those things come up, when they take place, not to be combative, but to be assertive in your truth of understanding of where you are in that process. So for instance, if someone says to you, oh, that didn't happen, but forthcoming that it actually happened, don't say, oh, you know what, maybe you're right. Maybe it didn't happen that way. No, this is what I understand from what happened, and be true in that process for you. And own that, but then also find ways that you can, heal that in the process.
Excellent. Does anyone else have a question? If not, I have a closing question before we wrap up. Early in the presentation, you mentioned a few of the people who have used manipulation, and it seemed to cover the wide spectrum, just about everybody, be it community, be it government, be it church. Um, I don't know if self was one of the examples, but even self, in just my personal opinion, can be a manipulator, especially if self, not the true self, but the artificial self, the publicly or commercially created self that you are taught to be, begins to persecute the true self, which is your spirit self. But it seems like it comes down to the question of who can you really trust? Who can you trust to not manipulate? And does it put you in a state of um, anxiety, or does it put you in a place of confusion because you can't trust the church, you can't trust the government, you can't trust your neighbor, you can't trust yourself? So the question is, who can you trust to not manipulate you um, as you go forward?
And you want me to come behind that?
We could do that in a workshop, but I guess
Yes,
that becomes
yes.
the question, right? Because who can you trust is really, I think, the stripping away and the building up of that reality. Um, but if you have a quick answer, I'd definitely welcome it.
Um, that was a mouthful.
A lot of layers.
A lot of layers, yes, and it definitely will take some digging. But you're right. Very, very relative question to, to who can we trust? And I think it goes back to that, identification question. Um, in so many ways, how can we trust, these sources if these sources are constantly, feeding us those lies? And again, as you stated, in terms of the artificial self and, the spirit self, I think it comes to a point where you have to learn how to really get down to the meat of discovering who you are, in true self, not artificial self, removing the layers of those family traditions, those social influences, those community indifferences, really stripping away those things and getting down to the meat of who am I really? And then once you discover that, what about me can be trusted? What about me do I know to be true? Um, and then finding like-minded people or like-minded individuals, I believe, who have, um, they won't be identical, but they will be more collective than they would isolated. And then embody yourself around those people who will protect that what you have learned and also help pull out of more of that truth within you.
Excellent. I'm going to, if you can unshare your screen, I'm going to share the final screen. But I wanted to thank you personally for putting together this presentation. It is an exhaustive subject. So, within 1 hour, we were able to kind of hit the tip of the iceberg. But it is a subject that requires deeper investigation so that people can be healed. Because essentially what we have going on is um, a lot of manipulation mixed with a minimal amount of understanding. Even as we go deeper into June and the uncertainty of knowing, well, now that the National Guard is in the streets, what does that mean? Is it going to go from manipulation to straight up and down Nazi Germany 2020? What is next?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to answer those questions so that people can have confidence in their true self and really know what they're building. But it seems to be a lot of just people feeling around in the dark, hoping that something good will come out of it. And I don't know if that ever worked out.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And you're right. Those are, questions that we have to begin to build a new narrative. That's why it's important to have those conversations in the comfort of our homes prior to us going out into, the war. I want to say war zone. It may not be the most fitting word, but it is what it is. So it's important to get clear about those things within ourselves and then to educate those around us so that we can have a strategy and have a plan of how to, move going forward.
Excellent. If anyone needs help with that topic of manipulation, or if anyone would like to be able to do a workshop, Jabrita will be hosting a 7-day workshop on trauma and how to deal with trauma. She's going to be hosting that in June, from June 4th to the 20th. And invite you all, I'm sorry, June 4th, 14th to the 21st. That'll be 7 days. Invite you all to check in your emails. You'll get an email about any of the upcoming workshops. And feel free to jump in because she's going to go through the various modules and allow you to interact to get your individual questions answered. So if anyone is interested in that, make sure that you're registered. If you have any friends or family you think that can be of benefit, let them also log on, sign up for 30-day redemption, and they'll receive the email as well. So thank you, Jabrita, for that. And anyone is interested in supporting what we're doing at 30-day redemption, no pressure and no obligation, but support what we're doing so we can take it a little further. We're looking to have a bigger platform. We're also looking to have additional guests participate. Anytime there's a 30-day in any month, we'll be doing a 30-day redemption. So we did April, we're doing June, we'll do September, we'll do November. But support what we're doing so that we can continue to expand the platform and expand this work that we're doing. So thank you all. This concludes day 2. Tomorrow we're going to do day 3. Check your emails, share the information, and most of all, use this information, both today, yesterday, and the previous, to help yourself be redeemed from your artificial self. Have a great day. Talk to you tomorrow. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.